Hello and welcome back to Wordsmith's Creative Writing for another tutorial with a prompt. And our prompt for this week was Country Mouse, which is describe the experience of a country-born character's first trip to the city. So there are kind of some processes we need to think about, and one of them is the backstory. How can you describe a character who has a backstory of being a country person who's never been to the city without filling up the text with all this detail? Trying to get enough backstory in without kind of flooding the story with unnecessary details is a skill, and it's very, very useful. So for our starter task, I want to go just with the character. So I'm going to take us back a couple of decades because I don't think there's much variation between country and city now in the 2020s. So I think if we look back to 70s or 80s, I think that's going to be a better time to do this kind of variance, because there was still that separation between country and city. Although if you want to take it as a modern story, you could your Country Mouse character could be an immigrant or someone who's come in from a war-torn country. So their childhood and have grown up in hell. They've grown up in a war-torn country, so it's that experience they're contrasting with a better life in the city. So that's your choice to make. However you want your country character to be, and how country you want them to be. So to build a character, we need to know our character. Most of these details will never come up in the story, but you need to know them so that when you then write from that character's point of view, you can see where the ideas are coming from. So you need to know, first of all, where they were born, where they grew up, what their normal day-to-day activities were when they were growing up. If they grew up on a farm, they would have been an early riser, worked with animals or worked on the land or whatever. Their family experience. If they came from a huge kind of farming family, has that meant that, because they're not the firstborn, they're not going to inherit very much. So they've got to try and find a place themselves. Country people tend to be out in the country and to enjoy being out in the country, whereas city people are kind of anti the mud and anti the real life of it. So what is their favourite memory? Something like standing at the top of the hill watching sunset, sunrise, something like that. And what kind of person have these experiences made your character? Is he kind of a quiet, strong farmer chap? Is he a fighter? Has he had to come through a really rough background and had to always be there to fight, always be ready to fight and defend himself? So these are kind of the questions you want to go for. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes. So I'm going to read through what I've got for my character. Your own character is going to be completely different depending on where you've started from. So I'm starting back in the 80s in Scotland. My character is called Ross Byrne, in kind of remembrance of Burns Night, which is tonight. He was born and raised on a small Scottish island to parents who run a croft, which is a small kind of Scottish farm. And it's very, very small and very limited in what it can grow, because crofts tend to have really rough ground. So they tend to have things like sheep, maybe a little bit of barley, and kind of a small market garden type thing. So it's not like a major farm, but it's enough to kind of survive on more than anything else. Ross is the second of two sons. He attended the small kind of island village school until he was 14, then spent most of his time on the farm. He is very tall and strong and muscular, because of all the time he spent literally on the farm dealing with the animals and whatnot. He doesn't drink because he was raised a strict Presbyterian, a Protestant sect that don't tend to drink at all in that way. I wouldn't say he was teetotal and strict, but just doesn't like to drink. He is an early riser who enjoys watching the sunrise over the sea. He likes the rain and changeable Scottish weather. He's rarely up after dark. His chores come first. So chores, family duties come first. not much else. He grew up in a small, very close community, no more than about 300 people on the island. Most of them are related, because that's the way island life ends up. But they have a tendency of sending their sons to the mainland to find a wife in order to keep the genetics varied. Although he has not really travelled to the mainland because it was a ferry that was only relying on good weather. And in this case, a couple of years before this event happens, his older brother left the island to bring back a wife from the mainland. They now have children and are kind of taking over the farm. So Ross is kind of a third wheel. His parents are still on the farm, but his brother and his family is taking over, so he's kind of left dangling. So that's how I'm developing this idea, this character. So now Ross is going to the city. So that could be Edinburgh, or he could go all the way to London. He's going somewhere else. So in order to develop what we're going to write for this task, we need to work out kind of why. So 4 more questions. Why does he leave home? What does he find in the city that are odd, strange or unsettling to him? Does he want to stay? And what has he experienced in terms of contrasts of people, of actions, of things that go on in the city that are different to everything else? So I'm going to give you another 5 minutes or so. It should be easy enough that you know your character, you know how they're going to respond to these questions, how they're going to think about these questions. So 5 minutes just to get another couple of points, just to pick up on what your character has found odd, challenging in the city, why they've left. Okay, so now we're actually on to the writing task itself. And I think as this prompt is described the experience of a country-born character, we're looking at it from their point of view. So I think there should be a letter. There should be a letter home from the country mouse to their family saying what they've experienced. So first things first, what is the format of a letter? Remember which side you put the address on. If you're going to start with a dear, you end with sincerely. I don't think it's going to be to Mrs. someone. It's going to be a dear someone ending in sincerely. So we've got to answer a couple of questions with this letter, aren't we? So first of all, what does your country mouse feel about the city? What have their experiences been? Have they been positive, negative? Have they found their place? And an inference, an undercurrent. It's going to be a little challenging. But I would like to see if you can develop an idea by not saying what you're thinking. If that makes sense. Inference is finding a meaning from something that is not clearly stated. So try and write into your letter an inference that your country mouse is maybe saying they want to come home, but not actually saying the words "I want to come home," or they want to stay. Either or. Okay, and I think we should start with a plan first, because something like this should be about 4, maybe 5 paragraphs of writing, and we should have an idea of where we're going. So you can make up your own plan if you want to. I've kind of just jotted down some ideas for mine. So first paragraph is the contrast of place. Second is the contrast of people. Third is what he's doing for work or employment. And fourth is ideas. So the contrast of ideas, things that he has come across for the first time in this new place. So I think 4 or 5 paragraphs should be about right. And I think this should be about 15-20 minutes. But don't forget, I've got the letter format. So I've got my address at the top right, the date, dear mother. Okay, and then indent from there. So, dear mother, I've been here just over a month. It's been quite an experience. This place doesn't stop. There are streetlights that shine icy white even after midnight. The buildings are much bigger than in Edinburgh, so that you cannot see the sun on the horizon. These skyscrapers hold the filthy air, and when there's no wind it's thicker than sea mist and makes me cough. I miss the waves on the rocks, because the beaches down here have been tamed to flat sand with concrete walls. The people in the city are so different. Faces and colours and voices and accents I've struggled to understand. They call it English, but it's not Dar's English. It's made me realise how closed in the islands are. I goggled like a lamb at the first dark skin I saw. I've only ever seen Scots complexion before. I can't help but rise early in the mornings. There's no one around except a few stumbling home after a long night. I tried the clubs once, but a sober man can't enjoy himself among drunks. I understand what the pastor said. I found a small pub here in Soho that needs a doorman. Walking hills and handling sheep have given me the ideal physique for managing drunks, so says Andy, the manager, and my roommate. I'm staying in the flat on top of the pub, which means it makes it easier for both of us. Andy's shown me all around Soho. It's such a bright and interesting place with something new around every corner. I miss the sound of the wind on the heather, but here there is music and colour, different rhythms dancing together, different people to meet. There are no black sheep here, Ma. The flock is so varied that differences are accepted. Give my love to Angus, Helena, the kids and father. Sincerely, Ross. So, that's my letter. And hopefully you can get some of the undertone I've got going on here. I think it's kind of clear why Ross left home. I think I've managed to get that right. So in terms of my my reflection for this piece, I'm going to give myself 3 questions to work through. First, I think that I did or didn't manage to infer the idea that whatever. Second, my favourite part is whatever because. And third, I was not successful with, and next time I will. So, this is our first time doing a letter, which is not necessarily a narrative. It's kind of a personal view on an idea. I think that's what makes it more interesting, that you can go into your character's head without telling their story necessarily. So, let's pick next week's number. Your number is 223, which is the painting. Oh, I like this one. Read ahead if you want to, but don't start it without me. I'll see you again next week.